Hey friends, it's Will and welcome back to the channel. Thank you so much for joining me. Today I'm going to be using something that a subscriber sent to me. She sent me these two alligator necks, which I love. Well, they're technically, are they heads or necks? I'm not quite sure. And I get to try out a new clicker die I had made. This is for my personal watch because I thought what better way to thank my subscriber for sending me some leather than to make something that I wear every single day. So today I'm going to make a watch strap out of probably what I think to be the best scales for a watch strap, and that is the neck. You get such a beautiful range of scales. It's a really hard wearing area of leather, the neck of the animal, and I just think it looks really nice more than anything else. The lining leather, I'm using Zermatt. This was provided to me by Rocky Mountain Leather in the US. There'll be a link in the description box below for that. Fantastic leather. The only calf skin I ever use for lining is Zermatt. It's made by Tannery Haas. It's a completely hypoallergenic and it's almost entirely waterproof. It's a fantastic leather for lining this sort of thing. You can use it for other things. You can use it for card holders, wallets, belts, whatever you really like. But it is primarily designed as a leather to sit against the body. It's designed for lining watch straps primarily. It is quite soft, so it is quite a difficult leather to skive. And the other thing about it is it does stretch. So what you want to do if you are trying it yourself is back it, laminate it to some Velodon. Now this is a 0.2mm thick. It's practically paper thin, but it's almost, well no, it is completely unstretchable. You cannot stretch this stuff. And it's what you'll use for, you can put it in between the layers of a belt, you can put it in between the layers of anything really. If you want to negate the stretch of the leather, you can put this in there. Now it does come with an iron-on backing, the Zermatt, the Velodon does. So what I like to do is scratch that off with some sandpaper, because I don't like introducing that amount of heat into my work personally. But your results may vary. You might like ironing it on. That's up to you. I don't like to do it, so I scratch it off with a bit of sandpaper, and then I do, because it's not quite as absorbent as some of the other materials I use, I do weigh it down whilst it completely sets for, I don't know, 10-15 minutes. Not very long, just long enough for it to completely set. What you'll notice is I skived the end of the Zermatt, the lining leather, before I attached the Velodon. I scratched the lining leather before I attached the Velodon. Now this is because if you skive it after you've attached the Velodon, you will have skived the Velodon off, which kind of negates the entire point of it being stretch resistant. I never ever put raising material that is not leather. I use this is Italian vegetables tan shoulder. It's an awfully expensive leather to use for this purpose. I would use split, but I don't have any split. But I never use foam to put as a raising strip, because I find that over time that foam will break down inside the watch strap and you will get a bit of a lumpy watch strap. So I always use veg tan leather, and that's the only thing I recommend to use is veg tan leather. So you will want to scratch off a bit of the surface of the leather when you're doing this, the surface of the top layer, because glue doesn't really stick to the top layer of stuff very well. You have to take that top surface off in order for the glue to penetrate into the fibers. That's kind of how it sticks together, is the glue penetrates into the fibers, and then the glue sticks to the other side of the glue, and you're done. So it's quite simple, but if the leather hasn't had the glue penetrate into it, you're not going to get a good bond. So I'm going to skive both ends of the raising strip down just to give it a nice gradual thinning, if you like. I don't really know what the right word for this would be, because as it goes around the corner of the wrist, you want it to go around the curve nicely. So I do skive that down a little bit first. This is by far the most important step of a raised anything. If you're making a belt, a watch strap, whatever it is that you're making that you're raising, that you're putting a raising strip in, making sure that is centered. This was probably 20 minutes of back and forth. Obviously I'm not going to show you 20 minutes of back and forth, but it was about 20 minutes getting it perfectly lined up to the 0.5 millimeter of accuracy, because as you roll that leather around that raising strip, any uncenteredness, which I know is not a word, don't at me, any uncenteredness of that raising strip you will see, and it will make your stitches not line up properly down the sides. If you're wondering what width my raising strips are, they are always half the width of the top surface or the bottom surface, same width. They're always half the width of it, allowing enough leather either side so that your stitches don't get pulled up by the raising strip itself. And then because you've got that tension going down the sides, it's really important to properly push that leather down the sides of the raising strip. It's why I curve it over so that there's not a horrible gaping hole either side, like a big drop off either side of the raising strip. So I do round that over really nicely. And then it's time to stitch this bad boy together. So I always do a 3 millimeter stitching line. That is 3 millimeters from the outside edge. Well, there is only one edge. From the edge to the middle of the prick marks. It's always 3 millimeters, and that is because it's for a number of reasons. It gives enough strength. It also allows for a nice width between my 1.5 millimeter creasing iron and the 3 millimeter stitch. So it's 1.5 to the from the edge to the crease, and then another 1.5 millimeters from the crease to the stitch. It just gives it a nice rule of thirds, if you like, and everyone loves a rule of thirds, let's be honest. So one of the reasons I ordered my clicker die is because, funnily enough, even though I have a lot of experience cutting leather, years and years and years and years of experience cutting leather, it is my least favourite part of leatherwork. You're currently watching my most favourite part. I love hand stitching. I think it adds so much to the look of the piece. This is 2.7 millimeter stitching, so it's very, very close together. And it is a 0.4 millimeter thread, 0.45 millimeter thread. It's very, very, very thin, but it just gives it a really nice, classy, elegant look to the strap. And don't you just love the look of those scales? Don't they just look absolutely gorgeous? You get a nice variety of bigger ones at the tip, at the actual watch, and then you have smaller scales going around to the buckle. I just think it looks so good. Now, for this long piece, I would recommend cutting the lining after you've stitched it. And the reason for this is if you cut the lining before you stitch it, when you pull that thread through, it can, doesn't always, it can lead to pulling that lining in, and you don't get quite the same result. You pull it in and it's a little bit narrow on the back, and you've got to do lots and lots of edge work to clean it up, which we don't want to do. We want to keep our life simple. And even though I do love edge painting, what I love even more is an easy edge paint, and this just gives you a little bit of an easier time. So for the buckle side, we're going to make it in almost the same way, but obviously at the buckle end you've got the fold over, and I like to do a 10 millimeter fold over to give that buckle end of the strap as much strength as possible, because obviously it's going to be put on and off your wrist every single day. That's going to be a lot of tension on the turn at the buckle end, so I like to just give it a little bit of extra reinforcement, let's call it. So we're going to do exactly the same technique for this side as well, with the Velodon and the Tannery Haas Zermatt. It's a great leather. I've never actually used it for anything apart from lining. Maybe I should make a wallet or something with it just to see how it behaves. But we do exactly the same technique. We skive the end first, so you get a nice gradation between the strap and the buckle. You don't get any weird bumps at that end, so because you don't want to feel anything when you underneath the watch in the lining. You don't want to feel anything against your wrist that is uncomfortable. So we skive it, and then we put the Velodon on that afterwards. So I do like to skive just that little bit off the tip as well, just because it means that you get a super smooth transition at that point. Reduce bumps, you don't want to feel bumps. And this is that 10mm turn that I was talking about. It just gives it a really nice amount of security at that end, and then you want to push that down really, really hard. For the line, for the racing strip, it's exactly the same. It's the same half the width of the strap. Now, as I have measured my strap pretty much exactly how I like it, I only need one keeper. So the keeper is the loop that you put the tail of your strap through so it doesn't flap about in the wind. And I only have one. You can have you can have one live keeper and one trapped keeper. The live one obviously slides up and down, the trapped keeper, well, doesn't. I only have one trapped keeper personally, because I don't like having two, and I don't need to have two with the length of my strap. You can have two if you like, nothing against you if you do, but I only have one, and it means that I have mine at exactly 8mm, because it gives me a really lovely crease line either side, and it's just thick enough that I like the looks of it, and it allows it for a slightly easier time edge painting it too. But one thing you will notice is that once I've trimmed off the lining of the buckle side of the strap, I will paint one end. So I'll paint the buckle turn first, and then I'll stitch it. Now the reason for this is because you can't get to this part after you've put the keeper in. You can't get to it. It's impossible. Well, you probably could if you tried hard enough, but I don't want the stress of that. I'd rather just paint it now and be done with it. Now the first layer of edge paint is by far the most important. You're laying the foundation for the rest of it, and if you do that first layer incorrectly, you'll spend the rest of your day chasing your tail. So you do want that first layer to be quite heavy so that it sinks into the gaps and you can start heating it into the edge afterwards. One thing I've found about doing watch straps as we close this up is watch straps are probably the best test of technicality, let's call it. They are incredibly technical things to make. They're very, very difficult, even though they're absolutely tiny. So if there's something you want to make that will test your technical abilities, watch straps are the way to go. You can get the pattern for mine on my website. I'll link that in the description box below, and so you can test out making them how I like to make them. But the technicalities of a watch strap are pretty mental actually, and I love it. I love making them. I've got probably 15 or 20 watch straps for my one watch, and I do rotate them on a regular basis.